Here I'm surrounded by people with such academic, intellectual brilliance, and I've been a Mazdoor, a factory worker all my life, so I find that I may not be able to do, but I'll try and make up for this. Now, here's what I would want to suggest. We have 60 minutes. I'm going exactly as per you schedule. Time allocated to me was 10 minutes. I'll speak 5 minutes in the beginning to set the context. Then Jyotika will take over and she'll talk about 20 minutes on the work done by Mr. Subramaniam. That's right. No. Nick, my God, there are too many. Covered. Then Venki will try and give his comments in 5 to 7 minutes. Then we'll have 20 minutes for the discussion, and I promise, if at all there are 5 minutes left, I will try and close up. Otherwise, we'll close at 3:15. So that's the flow we wanted to go through. Friends, I've tried to build this session on what we heard in the inaugural and today, and let me bring this context. It was Ajit who started by saying that we need high, sustainable, and inclusive growth. My submission is you cannot have a sustainable growth if it's not inclusive. So inclusive has to be built into a growth, so it becomes a reinforcement, because very fact, if you're not inclusive, you're unsustainable. So I'm building from there. What makes growth inclusive? When inequalities are reduced, that's what makes it things, whatever be the sector, etc. So it's there. Again, how do you make people who are challenged or who are not as much privileged, by skilling them to be able to get onto the job market and so on. Then Ajay talked about this 40 crore LFP of 140 crore people. Great concern, the fact that has been stable and not gone up until recently. Now that again, 40 crore out of 140 crore being in the labor market is again an unsustainable situation. So once again over there, what is the factor that determining why is it only 40 crores? Either people are not getting the job that they want, for which perhaps they're not skilled, or the skill that are required are not available with the people. So once again, skill becomes a thing. Then there was Pradeep and Jyoti. Sir, one request in meetings like this, at most you can have 2 Pradeeps. Now we have far too many Pradeeps here, so it becomes a confusion. So there was Pradeep who talked about the job. नहीं तो ठीक, पर ये बहुत okay. So he talked about human-centric. Jyoti talked about job loss, jobless. Again, what is this human-centric? What is this, etc.? Is about getting employability, getting employment, getting entrepreneurship, which again takes us to the skill. The point I'm trying to arrive at, that one of the key drivers of every single thing we have been talking about in the dividend getting is all about making people, as I said, employable, employed, and entrepreneurship oriented. So skill comes into a very, very important element, and this is what I wanted to mention. So this is the broad context setting. Jyotika is going to talk about it. I have some observations, and I'll tell you why, where am I coming from. I'm not, as an economist, intellectual, and I'm saying it in a very positive sense. I've been working in an enterprise for 40 years, out of which 10 years have been with the state enterprises, BHL and others. I've worked for 30 years in private enterprises and have been on the boards of companies. I'm talking about skilling as I perceived it from my lens, which is, of course, we're going to do. There are 2-3 points that come out very, very strongly to me. Yes, it's important to have the right policy framework. Right, it is important to create the necessary institutions. Yes, it is important for everything, including in skilling. But skilling is an area where I think it's unfair for us to outsource everything to the government. It is government which is not. We keep talking about in industry, right, अच्छे बंदे नहीं मिल रहे, I don't get what it is, and they start blaming the government. And this is one of the most unhealthy things that's going on, that we outsource everything as though government is a BPO. Sir, as an industry, I want to tell you, when I want to develop a vendor, I work with the vendor, I pay for the tooling, I give the designs, and I make the vendor work for me. I don't go to the government to get me a vendor. When I want a channel partner, I go there and I do all the work that is required to get a channel partner. When I go into technology, I go and work with a technology partner. But when it comes to most important resource called people, I say, Sarkar degi mere ko. Kyun degi? Can I not work with ITIs? Cannot not work with the colleges of skill centers and get this thing? The most important resource called human resources, industry has been pampered, or at least believes it's pampered. Yes, Sarkar ki responsibility. I'm sick and tired of, and I ask these industry guys, why don't you sit on the BOS of various education institutes if you think they're not teaching the right thing? Why don't you go and be a guest faculty? Why don't you get, we don't do that. So I'm just, basic point I'm trying to say, almost like a caveat or anticipatory bill for myself. I'm saying we in industry, we in the user, it can be Pune Municipal Corporation, it can be a hospital, it can be an industry. I think there is a role, sir, in this paper that we submit, put not only from a government policy framework, the responsibilities that need to be, the beneficiaries need to have the skin in the game. And that is what is required most things. And I illustrate, for example, I was talking last night with Jyotika. If Tata Motors, I'm giving as an instance, I'm a Puneri, they take 200 ITI apprentice every year for their own need. Incentivize them, let them take 300. Those 100 guys will do a great job if they give them to their component suppliers. Tata Motors will benefit if the skilled people who know what Tata Motors is all about are given the thing. That's the skilling we need. We don't want a separate institution to do it. I think there are mechanisms by which we can get this sort of thing. We should set up, there's a lot of talk of HEI, higher education institutions. Sir, I've been, and I think Jyotika, we discussed, educational institution we have got, look at NAC rating, look at the formula. What is the highest the Brahmins is PhD, research, teaching, all sorts of things. Skilling, it's not glamorous. An educational institution, higher education will not consider 3-month course, certificate, maza nahi aaya. 5-year integrated course, postgraduate course. So a higher educational institution will do it because you push them. We need to create, in my submission as a part of policy, sir, we need to create institutions which do skilling for a living. And there I think the point that came out earlier also by the other Pradeep, and the thing was, we need to standardize, we need to certification, that's my thing. The last 2 quick points. This is not an area where you can centralize. This is not an area where Shram Shakti Bhavan or Udyog Bhavan or Krishi Bhavan can say kya skilling chahiye. Vantage Bhavan, so ठीक. No, Vantage Bhavan trade bata dega, but skill cannot be decided by Bhavans, not even Sachivalaya and Mantralaya here. And I'm saying this is something which just needs to go down to the level, so we need to decentralize. So any recommendation we make should be about decentralization. The last point what I'm saying, technology is driving skill today. It's not the business, international trade. Technology is ultimately dividing, whether it's AI, whether it's automation, etc. So if it's technology which is driving, and I think Venki will talk about it, etc., we must understand that you need agility. You can't be spending time in forecasting. You need to be spending time in reskilling yourself, re-engineering yourself, and so on. So it's all about agility. And all this comes down to the final point that our inputs, and I would suggest, which is focusing a lot on government policies, government institutions, etc., HEI, I think my submission would be for the next thing, we have to focus on decentralization, agility, inclusiveness by including the stakeholders, and the role of the state largely to create an environment and certification. You can't have a nursing course being organized by somebody and giving a certificate if it's not vested. We are risking people. Just the way it's got a thing. So with this limited thing, I would now request Jyotika to share the highlights, and I'll just read the top line. She's going to be talking about the synopsis of the paper, which says challenges in skilling to be presented today. The paper presents a case for re-evaluating existing skill development strategies to ensure their relevance, effectiveness, and long-term impact on individuals' employability, industry competitiveness, and overall economic growth and process. So that's a core of what we're putting together. What I've added is something, all yours.
Sincere thank my erstwhile boss, Dr. K.P. Krishnan, who was not able to be here today, because of which I stand before you attempting to present what is largely his idea and his paper. I'll add a little bit of my own at the end, and it's opening it up for further discussion. As the chairperson just said, for me it is perhaps doubly daunting to stand before you, such a galaxy of distinguished academics and professionals, and talk about skill development. He described himself as a worker. Well, I was a government servant, and I have seen only the implementation, badly or not so badly, of government policies on the ground. And what I will say will largely be based on my experience in the skill ministry in government. And secondly, it is always daunting to address an audience after a lunch break, as we have been informed several times. So I do hope the little that I have to say will not have a soporific effect on the audience. Thank you very much. So this paper is about securing the demographic dividend, challenges in skilling in India. In skills, perhaps we talk most about demographic dividend and how India has to take advantage of its huge population, most of it compared to other countries, which is below the age of 25 years. And we have a huge number also in the working age group. And we have perhaps what has been said to be a 25-year period in which we can take maximum advantage of this state of affairs. So I'm going to present it like this. There's a current overview of the skills scenario, then the government role in skills policy, in infrastructure, programs, and strategy, then rising to the skill challenge, the way we have risen to the challenge of skilling India so far, and what we might like to do in the future also, strategies and approaches. And then what are the implementation hurdles in rising to the skill challenge? And then there's a last section that I have added on understanding certain nuances of skilling, based on which perhaps we can fine-tune further our approaches to what we are going to do about skill training or skill development in India. I would like to clarify at the outset that I'm going to limit myself to what largely the government has done for skill development. And by government, I mean both the Ministry of Skill Development as well as the Skill India mission, which has extended across states and also coordinates the work of other ministries in skill development. The second limiting factor here is that the skill ministry's mandate only extends to that portion of the working population which does not have academic degrees or academic qualifications. So we are talking about working persons who are not into professions based on academic degrees. So we have a national skill qualifications framework with competency levels 1 to 10, and that is what we will be confining ourselves to. So what I mean is, for example, nursing would not come within our purview because that goes into the realm of academic degrees. So going on to the current overview, most of these facts have been discussed in the previous sessions, touched upon in the previous sessions, and a lot of what I'm going to say resonates with what has gone before. I would like to add two things in particular which are relevant to skills, which have been touched upon before and which have kind of laid the foundation for this set of discussions. One is decentralization, decentralization of power for governance, better policy, better implementation. And the other is the importance of institutions. Institutions, democratic functioning, thereby implying greater people's participation and implying further outreach of all the programs of government or whatever policy we adopt to reach the last milestone, the last corner, ensure that everybody comes within the ambit of the benefit of the policy, which we are trying to create. So in the current overview, 62% of the Indian population, or 88 crore persons, are in the working age group. Working age group defined here as 15 to 59. It has been estimated that 71 crore people need new or extra skills. Whether skills are to be looked at as a challenge or an opportunity depends on your point of view. So the challenge is that most of our working population is in informal employment. Most of them are unskilled or low skilled, or at the most semi-skilled. So most of them would require new skills or additional skills over the next, immediately or in any case over the next 5 years, when the future of jobs dictates that many jobs and their nature will undergo a change. Now, we also add 1.2 crore persons annually to the labor market, and as has already been said, labor rate participation that is extremely low compared to the rest of the world. So the challenge lies in upskilling or reskilling or freshly skilling this humongous population. And we also have to remember that a large portion of them do not have the means to access skill training, neither the financial resources, nor very often the physical ability to access any skill training opportunities which might exist in the rest of the country. Now, there is a skill mismatch as seen in demand and supply. We train a lot of people in skills which are rapidly becoming outdated, so there is no demand for these skills. There is also the fact that the kind of skills industry needs do not match with the supply of skilled persons being produced largely by government institutions or by private institutions who are merely following in the wake of government institutions. There is also a mismatch in terms of regional imbalance. So there are areas which have highly skilled labor, then that leads to migration. Then there are other problems related to migration, and this begs the fundamental question that if you're going to skill labor, do you skill labor at the source, or do you skill labor at its eventual destination? So there are all kinds of issues which would come in here, and the government has to think of adopting a policy which will effectively cover all these nuances, which doesn't actually happen. So let me now go on to government in skill development. Broadly, by way of infrastructure, government has now 15,000 industrial training institutes. The industrial training institutes, which were begun in the 50s, and they were located in industrial hubs, still form the backbone of skill training in India. Interestingly, industry's feedback is that if a potential candidate for work has had some kind of acquaintance with an ITI, even if he or she happens to be an ITI dropout, they would still prefer that person to somebody who has never been inside an ITI. So that just indicates that somehow the credibility of subsequent skill training institutions has not measured up to the promise of the ITIs. So all the more reason why we need to strengthen ITIs and make them absolutely ready to cater to the needs of skill training, bring them up to date, and most importantly, ensure that they're well staffed, which is a point I'll bring up later. Then there are 33 National Skill Trainers Institutes. These are all in the government domain. There are over 700 Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras. When this government came in, they laid great emphasis on skill training, going to the extent of forming a separate ministry for skill development. And the flagship scheme, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, the PMKVY, was launched, and also these Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras, which were essentially a conglomeration of skill training centers in different parts of the country. As you can see, there are over 700 of them, so maybe roughly corresponding to one per district. This phase also brought in the distinction between long-term training and short-term training, which is something very peculiar to India. So long-term skill training is what is looked after by the DGT, the Directorate General of Training, and the ITIs fall under the overall purview of the DGT, though the ITIs are distributed across states and they also come under the state government. Short-term training has been looked after by the National Skill Development Corporation, and short-term skill training is also being imparted by various skill trainer organizations which have mushroomed across the country. They give, different states have their own schemes for skill training, different ministries run their own schemes, and short-term skill training varies between 3 weeks to say 3 months, sometimes extending up to 6 months. Short-term skill training, we have met with very varying degrees of success, because what has happened is that more than skills, this has only resulted in providing some kind of, not a guarantee perhaps, but some opportunity for a livelihood for the person undergoing short-term skill training. And somehow that seems to align very closely with all the poverty alleviation schemes which we have been implementing from the 80s onwards. So whether it was the Integrated Rural Development Program, which all of us grew up in service implementing, and which again provided livelihoods, or similar such schemes across states. States had their own schemes. So these livelihood schemes and the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, which is essentially a short-term skill training program, do have a lot in common, and I'll come to that later, because in my personal view, skill training has to be at a level higher than mere equipping people to have livelihoods. Yeah. The rest of it deals with the National Skill Development Corporation, which was set up by the government in 2009, and that was to engage industry, engage international governments and other players to come in to upgrade the quality of skill training in India and open up opportunities, bring in private funds to promote skill development. And a major initiative by the government was the Skill India mission, which was begun in 2015 and which aims to coordinate the skill training activities across states and across ministries. So every state has its own skill training programs, and there is a Skill India mission by which they are organically linked to the central schemes. Now, vocational education in schools has also been sought to be given a fillip, also under the new education policy, and the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship have joined together in promoting vocational education in schools. Then the establishment of the National Council for Vocational Education and Training, that is the body which constitutes the regulatory body of skill certification for skilling. Besides this, there are state councils for vocational training which have their own domain of certification. Now, we also have the government taking up a drive to promote the National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme to enable all kinds of employers, big and small, to come within the ambit of taking on apprentices. Then the government has gone in for decentralization by setting up district skill committees in every district. They are supposed to go in for decentralized district skill development planning. And there is the Sector Skill Council, which is supposed to be roping in industry and working closely with industry to identify opportunities for skill training and employability. There is the National Skill Qualification Framework and the National Credit Framework, which has been developed. And then there are two other institutions, the National Instructional Media Institute and the Central Staff Research and Training Institute, which cater to the curriculum and courses to be used in skill training, mainly long-term skill training, but also short-term skill training. And of course, this government has laid a lot of stress on exporting skills, skilled labor. So we have collaborations with other countries, and a lot of agreements and bilateral agreements have come up which include clauses for exporting skills. Now, the strategies and approaches that have gone into this, the government seems to be on the right track as far as decentralization is concerned, because as the chairperson had also pointed out, skill training cannot be a one-size-fits-all across the country. So local opportunities and resources have to be brought into play and identified for people to realize what are their aspirations towards skill training, what kind of trade they want to get trained in, and how they can access that kind of training within their own geographical area, for example, to make it more inclusive and equitable. Alignment with industry demand, this again need not be emphasized enough. We need to bring that in, and for this we need the active participation of industry also. Apprenticeship, decentralized planning, community participation is very important again. Now, interestingly, the industrial training institutes are supposed to have a kind of management committee, which is supposed to have members from industry and local government on their board, and they are supposed to oversee the working of the ITIs and make sure that they are relevant and cater to the needs of skill development. Unfortunately, most of these are lying defunct across states and across ITIs also.
It was adoption of ITIs.
Yeah. So now the implementation hurdles in rising to the skill challenge, there is insufficient engagement by industry. Skills have very low aspirational value. People don't want to go in for vocational education as opposed to regular education. Quality certification and credible certification is a very, very big hurdle we need to overcome without delay. And of course, there is no equitable access to skill training, as I mentioned. Operational inefficiencies, information asymmetry, and untrained implementers. These are some of the other hurdles in implementing skill policy effectively. I'll come to the last bit of my presentation, which is what I really want to emphasize in how to take this forward and perhaps present some kind of a blueprint for policymakers in the future if they take this into account. So understanding skilling. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is that skills, as I said, because of the low income levels, low aspirations, lack of connectivity across regions, lack of employment opportunities, we have tended to conflate skill training with livelihood training. So you equip people to earn their livelihoods, and then that kind of is taken as giving them skill training, where there has to be a significant difference between the two because skills are on a higher plane. Then skills come at a price. This is not something we have ever factored in, because tomorrow, even if you have a domestic sector skill council, nobody actually wants to pay a higher price to any kind of a worker or an expert technician or somebody or even a caregiver just because they possess a certificate saying they are skilled. And as long as you get people at much lower prices and without the necessary skill certification, nobody is going to buy into this whole business of skill certification, especially when it lacks credibility. So we need to realize that if the whole of India becomes adequately skilled, then definitely it would come with a cost, and it would cost more, which is something perhaps we are not in a mindset to accept at the moment. Skill training is not a substitute for basic school education. So basic school education has to be encouraged, and vocational education can only come after that. Industry has reiterated several times over that we want people who have primary education at least, so that they become trainable by us. And you can't just take somebody who has had no education whatsoever and thrust that person into skill training, thinking that you will develop a worker with high skills and high productivity. Then vocational education, it's very nice to talk about it, but unfortunately, vocational education in schools has been given secondary treatment. Go across the length and breadth of India, you will find that vocational education teachers are very often contractual appointments. They are not included in the regular framework of teaching staff. They have no aspirations because there are no promotion avenues. They are not included in any kind of normal training. So this has to change if vocational education is to be brought on par with other education, and therefore its aspiration rises. Now, there is the last 2 points. Yeah, just the last 2 points. I would like to point out that any government program, any government intervention has to have social equity built into it. So if government intervenes in skill development, then government has to ensure that it addresses certain areas of this whole labor and skilling issue, which is not likely to be done by anybody else, namely caste. Skills are very closely aligned with caste, and how that can be broken, there is an example I can share with you subsequently if anybody is interested. This is something which only the government can take up. Secondly, the government has to create a demand for skills, especially in rural areas and in those spheres and sectors where no such demand exists at the moment. That can be done, for example, in rural sanitation and drinking water and waste management. If we want the same standards to prevail or are prescribed in urban India, we need to have an army of skilled workers over there, preferably employed by Gram Panchayats, who also have the ability to navigate to private employment in between this employment, so that at least there is proper maintenance of assets at the highest level. For that, you need skilled workers. And finally, the last 2 points, we need huge amounts of authenticated data. Collecting data and skilling persons to collect data is itself a big task and would go into skill development in a major way. Finally, and I'm really grateful to Professor Apte for having brought this up in a short discussion I had with him some time ago. He pointed out that when your entire army of government functionaries, top to bottom, is so poorly trained and never get any refresher training themselves, how do you expect to implement any of the programs or talk about skills at all? And I think that's a very valid point. We need constant refresher training and upgradation of our own skills. Secondly, we also need vacant posts in skill training to be filled without delay so that people can be sent for refresher training. So these are some of the points I had. Thank you very much. If there's anything else, it can come up during the questions. Thank you.
So I'll just take off from where Jyotika ma'am left off. So she talked about all the initiatives that government has undertaken. What was kind of missing there is, what is the scorecard? How have these initiatives really panned out? And if you look at that scorecard, it's abysmally, it's really poor. When I'm talking about poor, we talk about, yesterday Professor Ajay talked about, 400 million or for 40 crore workers. And we're talking about less than 5% or around 5% are actually skilled. So 95%, so 20 million or 2 crores is actually skilled. So there's a huge gap from the 71 crores and 88 crores that we're talking about. If you only 2 crores were actually skilled, that gap is huge. And this is not just started recently, right? This program has been running for now 7-8 years. Those 2 crores have to be reskilled, of course. So first, even the working people need to be skilled, so that itself is a huge gap. And then we are talking about, bridging the demographic divide. So the problem is huge. Partly these initiatives have really not been very effective or efficient. That would be my kind of submission on that. Moving on from that part, so if we want to just, and again, ma'am also talked a little bit about this, starting this vocational skilling at schools. There was a report from CBSE schools on CBSE schools where which there are I think about 40 vocational skills that can be imparted, but most schools adopt only 1 or 2, and 80% of them adopt IT. So the rest of the skills are really not given any justice. So the remaining 39 of them probably just languish somewhere, right? Maybe there may be 1 or 2 that may be a little bit more popular, but by and large, large focus is only on IT and electronics and things like that, right? So that's the other part of it that, in schooling. So ma'am did talk a little bit about the perception of vocational in schools, that, there is a low aspirational value. So yesterday when Professor Ajay talked about, the countries that have done well, he brought up South Korea as one of those countries, and I just wanted to kind of see, how has South Korea addressed it, given that they have a statistics of 96% of their workforce is properly, formally trained and skilled, right? So what they have done, which I found quite interesting, is that at the schooling level, they have, of course, imparting skills is one, vocational skills is one. More importantly, they have also roped in a lot of career counselors, and they built a huge network of these career counselors who kind of guide the students to take up the right kind of skills, right? And that has probably helped them. Again, I don't know how much that has really helped them, but definitely something that has helped them. Okay, so this this was just a quick comment on what ma'am talked about. So let me share some thoughts on where I think technology can really play a key role, right? If you're talking about these large numbers, doing something at this scale without technology doesn't look feasible, right? So we have to really look at how to adopt technology. We have a billion smartphone users today. If there are a billion smartphone users, smartphone would be an easy way, at least one way that we can start delivering a lot of this, good content from a skill upskilling or reskilling or even the first time skilling standpoint. Why not leverage that very effectively? And what Bhargav sir talked about, the role of industry and things, definitely industry has a significant role to play. There's a lot of things. I mean, one of the good successes in skilling that we see from a private company is Urban Clap, right? I mean, they have managed to figure out how to bridge this, local demand and supply gaps very effectively. It's a private company. Of course, they are for profit, so they are not a social enterprise looking to, build this human capital. But definitely, they have figured out a model that has worked for them, and their investment has been really. It's not been very high. It's like they invested something like 250 crores of rupees, and the outcome has been 50,000 skilled employees that they have today, who are offering all kinds of services that we would typically put under the skill category. And we don't consider somebody working for a Urban Clap as, of course, it may not be an aspirational thing, but it's not, at least it's not seen as something, not a career progression or a career option to explore. So looking at this, so smartphones definitely one way to do. Partnering with industry, this Urban Clap is an example. Of course, there are good use case examples of where it has worked. Government partnering with IBM, government partnering with Tata Motors. There is a program called Tata Strive, working with Siemens to get a lot of people skilled on some of the skills needed for the manufacturing industry. Looking at technology, and in the education industry, we have seen this work very effectively. The Swayam portal, which offers a lot of educational content. Of course, it is catering to the higher education institutes, but that technology has worked very well. It's scaled well. The amount of content that is available there is just phenomenal. In contrast to that, there is a Bharat Skills platform. I really don't know why we would need a separate platform, why we could not have leveraged the existing platforms. It just so happens that, okay, the ministries are different, so, not invented here syndrome probably kicks in. But that's obviously not an excuse, right? Once you have a platform that is very well developed and working, why not just, stand on those shoulders and then do whatever is specific to your needs, right? Talking of the Swayam, the platform in terms of content, in terms of even smaller things like spoken tutorial and things like that, which are 10-minute snippets that really work very well for students to pick up a very specific concept. Again, skill is not, I understand that skill is not something that will always be virtual. There is a concept, there is a hands-on requirement. So it has to be in a hybrid model. But there is a lot of content that can be disseminated through the virtual mechanisms, and obviously supplemented with hands-on where required. In terms of content generation, enrollment, assessment, all of this, technology can play a very, very significant role. Quality assessment. I mean, technology especially now with AI and ML, you can really figure out how well a person has picked up the skills, and fine tune it to the pace at which the person is picking up the skills. So definitely there are precursors here. So we don't have to start from scratch. We just have to see what has worked for us and just use the same model and see how we can build on top of it. And there was this point that ma'am made about, do we pay more for skilled people versus, people who don't have a formal skills? Of course, it's also the responsibility of the person who has, one is of course what skilling they get, and it's also the responsibility of the skilled person to, consistently demonstrate that, they are doing better than a person who is not skilled in the area that they are working in, right? If they can't demonstrate their value, if they perform on par, then it's going to be a challenge. And this is something that we see even in, in the IT industry that I have been part of, right? People come with certifications, but unless those certifications really bring in significant merit in terms of their performance on the job that they have to do, that certification is meaningless. So definitely, that's something that we need to really look at and see, somebody would pay more only if they get higher value. So that value part has to come out very effectively. So coming back, my quick last point here is that, the efficiencies and effectiveness can definitely be improved, and we need to focus on it. My only request is that, the policymakers or whoever is working on, hold them accountable. Whatever policies they create, let it not be for optics. Let it be something, let them take, it's good to take bold, hairy, audacious goals, but not meeting those goals or even falling short of it to some extent is still acceptable, but falling short of it really to a very, very large extent, the way it has been, is clearly not acceptable. Somebody needs to be held accountable, and that accountability has to come in as part of this whole policy framework. Right? Thank you.
Okay, so far we're doing well on time. Before I ask, it's here. Can you hear me now? Yes. Yeah. No, we're doing. Thank you so much, Venki, and thank you so much, Jyotika, for conveying the points across. Before I open the question, it's not my closing remarks. There are a couple of things I do want to react to. Yes, industry was asked to adopt ITIs. I was part of industry ITI adoption. Cummins we did in Fulton and so on. And we realized, and a lot of my colleagues realized, that those ITIs will say, हमारे पास ये staff नहीं है, can you hire someone and put it there? We don't have this lathe machine, can you buy a lathe machine and do it? It just came on leaning, and in Fulton we did a lot of things for Cummins. I'm just giving you a live example. And it worked to the extent because Fulton was a godforsaken place, we needed people, so we persuaded that. But most industries won't do it. So really speaking, in addition to adoption, there has got to be a commitment. Most of the ITIs, 15,000 or whatever the numbers is, and I'm using the word ITI because that's the workhorse. All skilled things is ITIs. A 2-year course after 10th, and they have the short term. But ITIs, slightest change in syllabus, Jyotika, we wanted for this, it goes through the process, it won't come through, and as it is, life was changing. So that hybrid wasn't working. So I think so Cummins, we finally decided to do something else to make it happen. In Fulton, in Chhindwara, we created our own center for genset repair, etc. So I'm saying, I can't keep complaining as industry, I need to do. The second right I want to put, when I use the word industry, don't think of someone with a PNL and only making. To me, any user is what it is. A hospital should also be worried about the skill set. Pune Municipal Corporation should be worried whether they have skilled people to do, and they're doing a huge amount for us. Sometimes taps are not working, switch is not working. वो भी skill चाहिए ना? तो कोई भी user है मेरे लिए वो industry है. So they need to have their skin in the game. So they need to be engaged, is my submission in the policy making, sir, because having worked in government long enough, and I'm saying that sometimes, and she also said, the government, हम भी कहेंगे government आप ये करिए, तो वो करने को तैयार हो जाएंगे, मतलब they'll make a charter. But I think here it's important in skilling, which is so intimately connected to the well-being and progress of an enterprise. PMC is an enterprise for me. That they need to get onto this. This can't be outsourced to government alone, is my limited point I'm making once again here. So now, friends, we have 14 minutes, and I won't sum up because it depends on the questions. So we will close at 3:15. We are 3:05. So any questions, please?
Ma'am, thank you so much. You talked about skills. I just want to share my experience as JSS person. That in Pune there is a JSS, and we used to run skill courses. We did a lot of things. In the rural area, we did domestic electric machines repair course and all. What I find problematic is that there is no platform. I mean, all those women, they were excellent and they were getting money also because they used to, repair mixers and things like that. But when they come, ma'am, ye mixer alag model ka hai. This is of different. I didn't have any, resource or anything to do that. So that was another problem that while coming back. And second, as you said rightly, that too centralized. If you want to change any simple thing, Delhi, absolutely, we call it Mughlai in Marathi. It's impossible to change. Exactly, Mantralaya is also Mughlai. And yeah, it's a real skill in itself to foresee the future demand and design course. It's a special skill altogether. And getting that also becomes quite a issue, ma'am. Thank you.
No, I agree with what you're saying, and we need to decentralize as much as possible. Regarding your first point, I think you're just explaining what I mentioned about livelihood and skills. Because just very quickly to give an example, there was a self-help group which was working with golden grass bamboo in Kendrapada in Odisha. Now, basket weaving is taught to various people. There are already people in the profession, and they sell baskets locally. That's for a livelihood. But the golden grass workers in Kendrapada, they were organized by the state government and with some help from the center also. They got master craftsmen and experts, and then that went into the realm of skill training. So then it was no longer just basket weaving for like everywhere else. It enters into a much higher level of product and all. So for that you need to go into.
Please help, yeah.
Yeah, my question was regarding a new phenomenon that I am seeing. It is setting up of skill universities. So Maharashtra state has a skill university. Just as you drive down to Mumbai, there is a Symbiosis Skill University. Then I found out from some known people who are in the know of things, at least 5 states now have skill universities. So what would this university do in the domain of skill development?
Sir, if I could take the liberty, because I'm very deeply involved with the Symbiosis Skill University. They have one campus here and they have another skill university in Indore. Now, this is a completely collaborative. SKF and Shoppers Stop have actually an outlet in that place. When they teach children retailing, they have an actual outlet where these kids go and do that, and they do this. Similarly, when they work with Tata Motors puts their people there. You see an automobile there. So this is a course which is truly integrated with industry. And it's doing, I mean, I'm saying, sir also knows what Swati is doing all that, and same thing is happening in Indore. Now that's what is required. So what happens, 80% of those bachas get taken by these very people. So it does become a thing, and this skill university is come under the state, sir. It's not a deemed university, it's a state, under the state. You know about that, sir. So they have the flexibility of their syllabus. They put their BOS, and I'm very involved. वो काम कर रहा है. State university, which Apurva has been given, Apurva has got, वो अभी तो still on the runway, sir. It hasn't taken off. But if they adopt a model of cooperatively doing it, it will work, sir. Like Symbiosis. Sir, I was the chairman of the board of studies of SPPU, our university. They have interdepartment skills का एक program था. I was doing that as a board of studies. For slightest change in introducing a new course, it took me 6 months. BOS approve करेगा, committee of dean करेगा, academic council करेगा, और उसके बाद जाके होगा जब तक वो course की demand चली जाती है. So I think the agility, to answer to your question, state universities, sir, can do it. But they can create a lovely institution called SSPU or whatever else it is, but ask them to conduct a 3 months program. They'll take 9 months to except the 3-month program. I'm not being critical, as I said. So I think we need a little more agility, but you're right. These things should come.
Is it something that can go as our PIC recommendation that we must promote private skill university like Symbiosis?
Yeah, we can, if that's okay, we can put, because there is a, yes, sir.
University would mean undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate courses. What you are talking about is imparting skills to you.
You could do that, but I'll tell you, this very university, but they give certificate courses, 6 months courses, diploma. The university is an umbrella under which, for example, Symbiosis, even SPPU, gives you a 1-year certificate course, 6 month certificate course. University ये मतलब नहीं कि degree देना है.
Can I understand this? Education in that sense would mean you are training trainers and not trainees. Trainees. Yeah, but that is wrong. The concept of university is not trainees.
Sir, may I endeavor to answer partly your question and yours? Sir, I think my personal view is this, that we have a predilection for calling things by fancy names and going in for higher education. There is no need of a skills university. What sir has described, you can have an excellent state-of-the-art skills institute. The minute you use the word university, you get into problems. And the University Grants Commission and everybody else comes into it. So university is meant to be knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Skills institutes are meant to equip you with competencies for employability. And I think we've lost sight of that distance. So skills university is a contradiction in terms, in my personal view.
Yeah. So the semantics apart, let's call it skill institute. Symbiosis has made it a university because there are. Please, sir, again understand, somebody who wants to skill, our social system say तू graduate है कि नहीं, फिर तेरे लड़की की बात तेरे से बात करूँगा तो graduate है कि नहीं. Somebody has done a 3-year course in plumbing and electrician. If you keep giving certificate as against giving a degree. So one of the key reasons why we went for university in Symbiosis case was there is a social sector, there is a specialization. You're doing post-graduation in plumbing. So for that you need a university. I agree with you. Most of them have to be non-universities because, as you rightly said, skill centers. But I'm of the view, Vishwavidyalaya university ka matlab hai, vidya deni hai. It doesn't have to be intellectual English literature or physics. In plumbing, if I can extend vidya, I can call it a degree.
आम आदमी की जो समझ है, विश्वविद्यालय हो, यूनिवर्सिटी हो, यानी आपको डिग्रियां मिलेंगी और आगे उसका आप उपयोग कर सकते हैं। समझ में आएगी? तो ये semantics को तो ठीक करना जरूरी है ना? I mean, my own nephew in Jaipur is running a skills university. I don't know what he's doing. I'll go and ask him.
I'm saying there's a need for institute. And there is a need somewhere.
Jitika suggestion is more valid. Call it an institute. Call it a, whatever.
They have a 3-year program on welding.
Is this really a question of marketing or branding rather than just, nomenclature? I would think that if you have a better branding, you will get better remuneration and that certification will have value. Because without the branding and without the marketing, the person is not going to get value. So this, aap jo keh rahe ho na, basically I'll introduce you to a girl only if you've got a certificate that says you're a BA or somebody who really cannot get employment. The plumber will. But you're not marketing the course enough. So maybe that is an issue.
Yeah. But I again would want to submit, there are courses, AI courses or welding courses, I'll tell you I've done in manufacturing. Welding is a science where you can do post-graduation in welding. Believe me, that's what it is. Now, if you want the child to go through do a welding course of 3 years, he or she will never get it unless there's a university or degree in welding. Germany has this.
You become a scientist. You don't become a welder. You don't need 3 years training for becoming a welder.
It's like bakery, that hotel management has got BSc, whatever, MSc, but
Okay. Semantics apart, we need both.
The semantics have to be sorted out.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it just creates confusion in the arm army.
Okay.
I had a question. Actually, I was quite interested in the point that you made about caste and skills. So if you could talk a little bit about that example, that will be really good. And I also had a question for you, sir. If we really had to have 3 asks from the government as industry for why or what would be the three things that you need to do for skilling, because we clearly identified so many issues and challenges and capacity, and you also brought up the fact that this can also be a market, and there can be private suppliers and those who demand it. So to facilitate some kind of an environment where it is not just the government who's providing skills, what would be the ask from the government?
So I'll just give you the example I had in mind, which is something we actually tried to do, but we didn't go very far because we all broke up. As you know, let's take the issue of manual scavenging or cleaning of sewers, for example. Unfortunately, garbage collection, sewers, waste management is all, garbage picking is all left to a particular community, which happens to be at the bottom of the caste ladder. Now, given this, and given the fact that we keep saying that skills should be aspirational, given the fact that we talk about digitization, technology, mechanization, so we looked at the Municipal Corporation of Patiala because they came forward, and we said to them from the ministry, we had a program under which we could have given them some funds. We said, you give us a 5-year plan in which each and every one of your workers who clean sewers manually will take to machines. So you will train your workers. After you've trained a couple of batches, you will not say that we go back to manual cleaning because we've run out of batches or we've run out of workers. So you have to take your corporators on board. You have to make sure that each and every single person gets trained. Now that's one side of it. Once they get trained and you bring in digitization, you bring in computerization, you need to necessarily change the kind of roles they have, the supervisory roles also. So the entire structure of how the cleanliness mechanism of that municipal corporation works will undergo a change. When you have supervisors who sit before computer screens, in stages when you have promotion avenues and it becomes aspirational, there is every chance that there will be people from other castes who may come into it. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to try and make it happen by scrupulously adhering to not leaving anybody out. And for starters, all those people who get training in machines and in computers to deal with sewage cleaning and waste management, for a start, all the people who first get training have to be from that community which has been traditionally engaged in this, so that they get preference and they are not sidetracked by others who subsequently might think that this is also something which is doable. So we had worked a good bit on it. It seemed to be possible, and the government funding that I'm talking about, we told them that, we can fund you for machines. That in turn, they said we'll buy the machines from Punjab Agro. We said you can buy them from whoever you like, provided you follow the state procurement procedures laid down in your financial manuals. And we will give the funding from Government of India, taking the plea that after all, this is a necessary adjunct and a necessary part of the skill training itself. That is why we are paying for the machinery, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to pay for the machinery. So, and naturally that would lead to competition. They would have to battle with their corporators who would have to come on board on this, and generally talk about changing the mindsets. As I said, it can't be done overnight. But this is the kind of beginning which could be made, and there are countless more examples where skills are aligned with caste, which we need to look at. This is something nobody talks about and nobody wants to have anything to do with, but it's a fact. The low aspirational value also that we are talking about, Dr. Krishnan had given us an example. We were saying that hotel management about 3 decades ago did not have aspirational value. People didn't want to say that their children were chefs or in hotel management, but that changed. And Dr. had an interesting reason to give for this.
Yeah,
He said that could be because traditionally chefs have come from the upper castes. So the change happened faster. The short point is, caste is very much enmeshed into the whole business of skill training and economy and employment as anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. A quick answer because
Sure. So your question was, what are the asks from the government, right? My only submission here is that, when we put a policy in place, let's be realistic on what we want to achieve. Let's have a workable plan. Let's not put a goal or an objective which is not achievable. Or you can you're okay to put an, if you have the wherewithal to go and make it happen, wonderful. So have audacious goals, but make it happen. The second thing is on, if you ask me the reason for the apathy that I see, I mean, the reason for the poor performance is apathy. I don't think skills have been given sufficient attention, which is why you see that, there is not much in terms of outcome that is happening. And third, if you want to kind of make anything successful, you have to define what to measure, how you're going to measure it, baseline it, and then set improvement goals. If you put those in place, it's going to happen. At least you'll achieve those goals, and then you start working towards improving them further. But till you have the idea of what you want to measure, how you're going to measure it, how you're going to baseline it, these things would be a non-starter.
Yeah, lastly, have the user's skin in the game. Don't do it unilaterally. Get them to commit, and they should perform. Thank you very much. We'll talk. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate. Just 5 minutes late.